my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel, Springboard Thought, where I talk about books. This is going to be a recent reads of not Booker titles. I'm segregating these videos as of right now because I'm reading a lot of Booker eligible / hopeful / the most voted on to likely make it onto the long list of the Booker. And I'm reading so many of them that I might as well just segregate them and make them easier, quicker videos to consume. So this is going to be my week in reading, mostly of last week, that aren't Booker titles. The first one being Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard. I read this with Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot, Shelley from Shelley Swearingen, and a commenter and member of the Up to No Good book club, Sonia. This book is a nature book / memoir. It combines the two, as far as I know. I don't know much about nature books. I've read maybe 4 in my life. So yeah, this is more of a blind spot title for me. I very much enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It almost feels like a short story collection in terms of how uneven the writing is. Each section is like a very specific event or chain of events throughout the year of Annie Dillard staying at Tinker Creek. The first 3 chapters are phenomenal in their writing content. It's some of the best writing I've ever consumed, I think, in terms of just evoking a sense of time, place, distance, travel, as well as the similes that she uses to describe the land. It's just incredibly apt and surprising in what she compares things to. And it was just incredible. And then after that, it kind of where it gets uneven. There are whole chapters that I don't think it'll stay with me. There's a muskrat chapter in which she's hunting muskrats, and it's very interesting, fun, and like a return to form almost for the writing, but not quite. It never reaches the heights of the first 3 chapters for me. But there is a lot of interesting stuff. And the book club that I can't remember the name of, with Heidi's Reading Life and somebody else, like the Naturalist Club, I think is what it's called, is chose this for last month. And basically the scenes that everybody else described when they reviewed the book stayed with me as well, like the mosquito drilling through a reptile, like a snake's neck, in order to get at the blood. So her musings on like the sort of casual cruelty and beautiful spirituality, I guess, of the world. It's got a lot of metaphysics in this, and Dillard herself in later sections in the 2 epilogues that follow it kind of ruminate on how young she was, how rueful, I guess, she is about the way in which she constructed the narrative, and she probably wouldn't have done the same thing now, but it is the way that it is for a good reason at the time, and a product of its time as well. So especially in terms of colloquialisms and referring to indigenous people as Indians and stuff like that, it's definitely dated in those terms. But when she isn't speaking about those things, Eskimo instead of Inuit, hunting caribou, it is rather timeless. So next I got from the library, Did You Hear What Eddie Gein Done? This is a graphic novel by Harold Schechter and Eric Powell. This is a nonfiction construction of Eddie Gein, depending on where you're from apparently. And he is a sort of famous murderer who's sort of receded into the annals of history somewhat, but lives on in predominant culture. He's inspired the Psycho movie and the book, as well as the book of Silence of the Lambs and the villain in that, and sort of is the inciting incident or something of America's obsession with this kind of story that predates most of the ones that we think of. So it was very interesting. It's a very rural life, and as you expect with these guys, his sort of mother's the affection, like the way that she raised him and brutalized him and traumatized him, seems to have led to why he has done these things, as well as like it's maybe some sort of thing to do with how he was born. Like he might have been born with issues or something as well, if I remember correctly. And the artwork is quite good. The story is fairly linear. It's a little, it could have been a little bit more pacey, I think. But it is a really good reconstruction of the man's life and the events that is known. And it does, especially at the end, go into what is real, what is not, what they put into this nonfiction account. There's some very specific sort of glorification or dramatization of some of the thinking processes that Gein has, and it's all supposition based on certain things that they've consumed about his life. And so it can't, like, the veracity of it is, it's just like an inference that they're drawing on certain things that he has said, things that were found at his house, and certain stuff like that. And that, because it is graphic novel, was interpreted in certain ways and made to be sort of at odds, I think, with the nonfiction narrative, at least for me, because it's not merely positing this inference, it's making it a very convincing thing that the audience is consuming. And it does, you know, at the end digress into why they have done it, but it still feels a little bit at odds. So it got 4 stars instead of 5 stars from me. Next, I consumed Swimming in the Dark by Tomasz Jedrowski. This I consumed on audio, and the narrator is Will M. Watt. W-A-T-T. This was a 3-star read for me. It was completely fine. It was kind of like exactly what it is on the tin. It was very solipsistic rendering of a man who is living under a dictatorship, is not allowed to be queer questioning, gay man probably, but questioning. He goes through the kind of a predictable arc of finding somebody that's kind of like him. They have to subvert those parts of themselves in order to traverse society and to get out, or attempt to get out of the society. And yeah, trials and tribulations as far as that, and then it's just a very linear construction of that. It was fine. It didn't particularly make any kind of mark on me. I'm glad that I consumed it, because a lot of people have been referencing it last year, I think, towards the end, and I just wanted to know how good it was. But yeah, for me, it was just sort of an uneven, fine read, and the narrator was also just fine for me. Next, I consumed Mouse. I got this actually from Shelley Swearingen. She sent it up to me because it was impossible to get from the library, or seemingly anyway. I'm guessing because of the recent ban on the book, it drove a lot of sales and people have been buying it up. You couldn't buy it, you couldn't get it at the library. It was waitlisted to like 49th in the queue, which is something wild. And so she sent me a copy, which was very nice of her. I gave this 5 stars. It's in my tops and flops video as one of the tops. I thought it was a fantastic graphic novel memoir. It was very realistic, honest, especially with the relationship dynamic between he and his father, and why his father was the way that he was, in some ways not returning from the war like a sort of whole person. And it was very like tumultuous, interesting arrangement that it had a meta construction. He is interviewing his father and recording them on tape, and then makes this graphic novel. And there's that part of the story, and then there's also the actual story that the father tells of him living throughout the Holocaust and preceding it as well. Actually, a large portion is kind of preceding it. The first volume, basically. And the second volume is Holocaust. So, very moving, very interesting. I thought that the art style might be a little too simplistic for me, but I found that it was really great. No complaints whatsoever. I thought it was great. Next, I consumed on audio Maurice by E.M. Forster. This was a 5-star read but it was also narrated by Ben Whishaw, who is just incredible. I don't think I could separate the reading experience or listening experience in this case from the book. So is it a 5-star read because Ben Whishaw was in my ear? I don't know, but I thought it was just fantastic. I really like the prose work. The story ended on more positive a note than you typically would imagine for something like a classic, right? Of gay literature, especially something that is along class stratification. I don't want to give too much because the character has more love interests than you might expect, and even the title sort of throws you a curveball maybe at the very beginning to halfway, where yeah, you just aren't sure what it's trying to imply, I guess, while being vague. But basically it's just these people needing, again, to subvert those parts of their identity to traverse society. One's rich, one's relatively poor, and they're trying to suss out some sort of living situation as well as being queer questioning in a culture that doesn't allow it. And it was just a very impressionable, very like easy to consume, probably not like hard hitting at all. I wouldn't say cozy either though, read. And the ending is the most notable thing about it. Next, I'll be reading Alec by William Canzio, I think. I'll put it up on the screen. I can't remember the author's name. And this is a reimagining, retelling, continuation of the story beyond that ending. So I'm very interested to see where this person imagined the story to go from there. So next I read Dreadnaught and Sovereign by April Daniels, narrated by Natasha Sudek. This, who was quite good at narrating, I would say. Like out of a 5-star, maybe like 3.5, 4-star narration. Whereas Maurice was like 5-star, blew my mind kind of deal. This is a queer story about a trans girl named Danny. Pre-transition, Danny is out doing her nails behind a dumpster or something like that, getting away from family problems in which their father is massively transphobic. And this is a world in which superheroes exist. A fight goes down between a superhero called Dreadnought and somebody else. Dreadnought is felled and killed. This is all within the first pages. And the power, the mantle, I think is what it's called, is transferred to Danny, transforming their body from physically like cis to a cis woman instead of male, I believe. But it's as though the surgery had taken place, I believe, not completely reconstructing. So Danny has no womb, for instance. So it's a very interesting concept, and I thought it was executed very well. Danny goes from having no agency and no power to having it all, but still being very crippled by internalized homophobia, transphobia, the way that her best friend starts treating her as soon as she's hot, basically, and the friends that she's able to make, as well as then having to contend with being the first, I think, ostensibly, at least in this world, trans superhero who has like a very high profile. It's almost like, you know, like she's Superwoman or something, you know, and has to balance work life basically, like work is in saving people if she even wants to be a superhero, coming to terms with her own identity while her parents are literally trying to get her into a doctor in which they would then ironically try to get her to reverse this procedure in some way, and it's just dealing with a lot of that stuff. And so it's sort of interesting because it posits, like, out of all the things Danny has to deal with, the hardest aspects is still her trans identity, even despite having the agency. And so it really is good at throwing different issues at the reader in an organic way and showing, like, even with all this stuff going on, the trans issues with society and internalized notions and stuff like that are the real sort of villain to combat, even though there is a very like linear, predictable path with this arch enemy nemesis person that she goes through. And then the second book is less successful. I gave Dreadnought 4 stars and I gave Sovereign 3 stars. And it switches essentially from the micro perspective to the macro perspective for the second book, showing systemic inequality issues and like going into not my favorite stuff of like the logistics and business practices of superheroes, and sort of like unionizing, making money, PR, dealing with the police and all that kind of stuff. And so it was just kind of like less interesting, but then simultaneously was able to shed systemic light on trans issues in that way. So I can totally understand why it works that way that it does. It was just less captivating of a story for me. And then lastly, I consumed Love in the Big City by Sen Young Park and narrated by Daniel K. Isaac. These last 3 are all on Audible, and this book for some reason on Audible was like $6 or $7, so I picked it up on sale. And the Dreadnought series and Sovereign was free with Audible Plus, so no reason not to get it. Love in the Big City, I'll try to be quick about. It's 4 stars. I thought it was really great. It's sort of a plotless novel-ish in which it's broken up into short stories, sections of his life, maybe semi-autobiographical, maybe, not really sure, in which he meets a new guy and goes throughout a relationship, although the first one is more about meeting his best friend, girl, who then that relationship becomes complicated by the relationships that they get into. But it's more or less is about a male guy that he meets, friend or lover, who shifts his relationship with himself and his family and the world in some way. And it has like a little sort of mini arc in a short story kind of way. And then it builds from there, going later into his life. It's very like dry, sardonic wit, which I really actually appreciated and liked. I laughed out loud at multiple spots. I thought that even though you know that the chapters were formulated in this way, and so you know that the previous relationship was probably going to end in some way, it didn't mean that that person never re-enters the life in the future, so it didn't bother me very much. And kind of, I always think of love, I guess, as a construction that eventually dies or fades away anyway. So I really liked how this was formulated. I jibed with what they were talking about with their life, their loneliness, their strange feelings, I guess, about the relationships and the things that they got out of life and their passion. And it's a very low-key interior book, but that's what I'm about. So I absolutely liked it quite a bit. And the narration in this one was exceptional. Like I would give it, 4.5 stars. Not quite Ben Whishaw, but very, very good. Especially very difficult dropping some of the way the humor works, and it totally lands with the narrator. So I thought that was very impressive. And yeah, I think that's it for this video. So the next one will probably be another booker, 6 or 7 books to wrap up. If you have any questions, thoughts, queries, or anything at all, put them in the comments below. And otherwise, I will see you next video.